Meteorologist Zach Fidella here with you with HurricaneTrack.com on this Friday evening, tracking Hurricane Irma as it slowly churns its way closer and closer to the coast of Florida, unfortunately. But right now, the storm remains a very intense Category 4 hurricane, 155 miles per hour. That is 1 miles per hour shy of a Category 5. I said it last night, I'll say it this morning, I'll say it again. Don't get so stuck on these categories. The difference between a 4 and a 5 is really not much when you're talking about 1 miles per hour, okay? So we have a significant impact that's coming for the state of Florida. And we've had a little bit of some changes with the track a little bit today. So let me get right into it and show you the latest satellite imagery because clearly this thing is actually very close to a landfall, possibly on the coast of Cuba. And that's great news. No, it is not good news for them. But notice the coast of Cuba is running right here, okay? This storm keeps jogging west. It keeps nudging itself farther and farther west, and it's eventually going to run itself right into land. Now, the mountains of Cuba, they're all right here. If it ran into that, we would see a quick weakening of the storm. This is very flat up here, so the part that it's probably going to run into is a flat piece of land, unfortunately. So we're not going to see much in the way of knocking this down, say, a couple of categories. We might see a little bit of weaken, especially if it gets far enough onshore. But remember, the track is taking it, continuing it off to the west-northwest or westerly direction, and then it's going to start to make that turn once it gets right to the coast of Cuba. So enough of the circulation doesn't look to make it all the way on Cuba to see any major impact or at least major decrease in the strength of the storm. And actually all day today, and this is the Cuban radar again, this is not very good resolution. I'm trying my best here. This is Cuba's radar, so the resolution is not going to be great. I'm going to zoom in a little bit for you, and you can show you. There's the center, and notice how we have a closed eye wall now. You see the ring of heavy, heavy rain right around the center. All day today, it's been fighting a eye wall replacement cycle, okay? And it looks to finally have gotten rid of that interior eye wall. And so all this thing needs is a little bit more time over water, and we're probably going to see it strengthen a little bit. Don't believe that's going to happen, at least in the short term, because it's getting too close to the coast of Cuba. But once we get this storm to turn, maybe sometime tomorrow, that's when we might have to worry about maybe a little bit of strengthening. In the latest track from the National Hurricane Center, the 5 o'clock advisory indicates that they're bringing this back up to a Category 5 when it's basically over the Keys. Right here at 2 a.m. Sunday, they're bringing the storm back up to 160 miles per hour. That's back up to a Category 5. So, yes, it's probably not going to strengthen when it's this close to Cuba. When it makes this turn, remember, all of this water in here, very, very warm. No wind shear still, so that's why there's the possibility that this thing can really strengthen once it gets right over the Florida Straits. Not going to have a lot of time, but that's kind of part of the issue is it could quickly just develop right offshore. Not that anybody should be taking this lightly, even though it has come down just a little bit from earlier. We're not talking about 185 miles per hour storm. We are still talking about 155 miles per hour. Very intense Category 4, borderline Category 5. Notice the hurricane warnings they cover. Basically, they're going to go all the way up the coast of Florida throughout the night. Probably later tonight, they're going to put this hurricane warning up all the way up the coastline. All of Florida. It doesn't matter if you're on the west coast, east coast, all of Florida is under the gun for a significant hurricane impact. And the change today the models have brought it just a little bit farther west. Remember how we always were focusing on Miami over here. The track looks like it's going to go just to the west of Miami, right across the say, southern to middle Keys, and then possibly somewhere Naples, Fort Myers area, you might actually get the eye to come right over you. So I know a lot of people, when we started seeing that track shift over here, a lot of people on the West Coast was like, hey, maybe we might get by without this storm. That's all going out the window. We are seeing a trend towards the west, and this could bring significant surge into some of these locations. Don't want to forget about places up north, but Carolinas, your threat has definitely come down. Since we've been talking the past few days, remember it could get back offshore. That looks very unlikely, almost probably not going to happen at this point. This storm is going to arrive right up the peninsula and then bend back west. So that's going to take a lot of your impacts. You're just going to get a lot of rain. You're going to get a little bit of wind, but you're going to get a lot of rain. Southern Georgia still could have a pretty strong tropical storm as well, but the major impacts from this storm are from Jacksonville, downward. That is where we're expecting we could see some wind gusts over 100 miles per hour all the way up to Jacksonville. That's how strong the storm is, and that's how far we expect it to at least maintain some intensity as a hurricane. Let me get into the specifics here because I want to draw your attention to, with a track farther west, the possibility to see significant surge, especially in the western portion of the state. We're talking Naples right here, Port Charlotte, Punta Gorda, Fort Myers. This center, if it comes like this, okay, and it starts going up, might be a little more east like that, but say the eye does something like that right down the middle of that little track area, that water is going to get pushed through the Everglades. It's going to get pushed into places like Homestead, Miami. You're still going to get a very significant surge because you're on the east side of the storm. Maybe the worst of the winds might go a little bit to your west if you're in Miami. Still going to see wind gusts over 100 miles per hour. In high-rise buildings, it's going to be higher than that. So all of this location, remember the east side of the storm is the worst side. You're still going to see significant impacts, but the center might in fact go to your west just a little bit. But I'm very concerned about these locations from Sarasota downward, even all the way up to Tampa. It's almost like I feel like they didn't take the storm as serious because they thought it was going to go to the eastern part of the state. And we've seen this trend, and then people get so focused on that center line. We've seen this trend that it's going to take it somewhere almost maybe right over Naples, something like that. That is going to push a lot of water into these locations. We're going to see a pretty significant surge from Port Charlotte downward through the Everglades to the tip, or to the southeastern tip of Florida. So I know a lot of these locations, you want something to base this off. Charlie. Remember the wind impacts of Charlie, but very little surge. Well, this is going to be the same wind impacts for you, more surge, a lot more surge. And so that goes to show you the threat that exists for the southwestern corner of Florida, in addition to the southeastern corner as well. Let me give you a little bit of a different insight into this. This is the latest GFS model, okay, and it's showing the wind speeds that the storm could possibly have, or the wind gusts that it's going to have. I jumped ahead for you, and I jumped to at midnight, okay? This is going to be midnight tomorrow night, Sunday morning, midnight, it's technically Sunday morning, okay? The center is about to approach the middle keys. There's the center right there, okay? It's going to be a little hard to see because it's sort of small on the screen, but as I put this into motion here, notice as the center, it takes a second to load each time. Notice as the center goes almost right over Marathon. That's almost like where it's putting it. Again, could be a little left, maybe as far south as Key West, maybe as far north as something like Key Largo, but that's looking less likely. The upper Keys direct hit looks less likely, more like the middle Keys. This GFS brings it right into, it's going right over the Everglades, a very unpopulated area right there, but I want to draw your attention to some of these wind speeds that we're picking up here. It's got, 134, places like, Homestead, Miami, 120 with wind gusts. Look at the wind gusts. Okay, thankfully over here in Port Charlotte, Punta Gorda, and Naples, if it goes just to your right, okay, you're going to get an offshore wind. So the surge is still going to come up just from the general push of the hurricane, but it's not going to be as bad as, say, if it goes a little bit. Let me change the color here just so I'm drawing on a perfect thing. See, the wind's blowing here, so it's blowing the water offshore. The worst of the surge with this will be right here. The European, meanwhile, takes it more like this, okay? Let me get rid of that arrow. European takes it almost like right across Key West. If it does that, that water is going to really get pushed into places like Naples. And so that's what we're saying. This is going to have wind impacts just like Charlie, because notice some of these wind speeds that we're getting up. As I put this into motion, you're talking 120, 130, okay? These are wind gusts, but those wind gusts are what's going to do the damage. And there's that center, the center of the eye almost going right over Naples, and you're talking 131, places like Arcadia, Florida, getting into the central part of the state. This is all offshore wind in Punta Gorda and places like that, but still, you're over 100 miles per hour in those wind speeds. Those in Fort Lauderdale, 102. I'm just trying to draw your attention to how this is all going to play out. The entire state is going to be engulfed in 100+ miles per hour winds, because I'm going to now push this along pretty far so I don't just get too wordy in here, but I'm going to push this all the way up through the middle part of the state and get closer to Orlando and Tampa. What are the impacts coming for Orlando and Tampa? Well, same story. You're going to see wind gusts over 100 miles per hour most likely. This is getting into the central part of the state, getting to Sunday night. So remember, landfall somewhere, in the Keys, it'll be fairly early. We're talking maybe pre-dawn hours on Sunday. And then sometime in the morning hours, you'll actually get a landfall. And then by Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, it's getting closer to Orlando. And look at the entire state of Florida. I know it's hard to see, but we're talking 100 miles per hour gust in Tampa, 100 miles per hour gust in Orlando. All of the East Coast engulfed in these wind gusts to over 100. All of the West Coast. It is the nightmare track for this state. It just is. The state of Florida, there's no place in the peninsula of Florida that is going to escape sort of the wrath of Hurricane Irma. It's going to take that worst possible scenario track where it's going to go just west. Remember, if it went over Miami, the western part of the state would probably get by nicely with, yes, a little bit of wind, but not much. It's not going to take that track over Miami. It doesn't look like it. Looks to trend a little bit more west. That is going to put the worst impacts over the southwestern part of the state, extending to the southeastern corner of the state too, extending into Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm. Remember, the right side of the storm is the worst, and right where the center goes is the worst, at that eye wall. So that's why today the changes that have brought it more westerly, I think the people in the southwest corner, Naples, Fort Myers area, they were downplaying it because it might go to their east, and they know the east side of the storm is a little bit weaker. Well, I hope they didn't, because it looks like you might take a direct impact from a Category 4 or Category 5. And remember, Charlie. I mean, that Charlie was one of the worst storms. It was strengthening on approach. It strengthened as it went inland. The winds were horrendous with Charlie. Now you're doing the same wind damage, and you're going to bring in some surge, and some significant surge too. Charlie didn't have much of a surge, but Irma is going to have surge as it moves inland. So the bottom line tonight is the storm continues to be very powerful. Some weakening could be possible as it kind of moves over the coast of Cuba or right along the coast, but there is that potential it could re-strengthen as it scoots off the coast of Cuba and goes through the Florida Straits. Very warm water, good environment, could re-strengthen to a Category 5 right as it moves into the Keys and eventually into southern Florida, and then it'll ride right up the peninsula of Florida as we go throughout the day on Sunday. I'm meteorologist Zach Fredella with HurricaneTrack.com. That's the latest information. Of course, we'll keep you up to date as we go through tonight, tomorrow, and Mark is down there. He's putting out the pods. He's getting all the information. And of course, you can always watch that live on Ustream, and it'll be all on the app as well as on social media and stuff like that. So I'm meteorologist Zach Fredella. Hopefully everybody has a good Friday night and a good weekend ahead. And if you're in the storm's path, make sure you've taken precautions and rushed those to completion. Have a good night.